Hello everyone, my name is Mr. OAU and welcome back to the channel. It's great to see you back here and tuning into another video. For today's video, I'm planning on launching a new series of videos, and as you can see from the title of the video as well as what you can see on your screens, these videos will be targeted at advice, alright? In these videos, I plan on passing on advice to you all, which I have come across in my many years of teaching English, advice which I truly believe will make all your lives so much easier when it comes to interacting with high school English. Yeah, the reason why I have decided to focus on these style of videos is because I believe that sometimes we get too wrapped up in analyzing texts, right? Analyzing Shakespeare or answering unseen short answer questions. We're too busy just doing English, right? For the lack of a better term. And what we do lack is we lack taking a step back and looking at how we are actually approaching things, right? We're so focused with doing the actual thing, we don't take a step back, or we don't take the time to reflect if we're doing it in the most efficient way. So the best analogy that I can really think of is, let's pretend that, understanding a text or understanding a Shakespeare text is like reaching a destination that you want to get to, okay? If you're so focused on driving to that destination, you never really take a step back to see if you're, let's say, driving the right car. Let's see if you're using the right route to get to the final destination. Are you using the right fuel? All right? So with these videos, I am going to attempt at least to redefine the way that you approach English, right? So I'm making sure that you are using the right car, that you are using the right fuel, that you are using the right route, yeah, when you are doing things such as analyzing Shakespeare or answering unseen short answer questions. Yeah, these videos will redefine the way that you view English for the better. At least hopefully. Yeah, that's my goal. Yeah, if we do get there or not, I don't know. Let's hope we do. Okay, so with that being said, today's video will be on the topic of surprise techniques. Yeah, to be honest with you all, I really don't know how English literature evolved in this direction of analyzing techniques with this high focus, this such a big focus on being able to pluck out techniques and understand their effects. I don't really know why English has evolved in this way, but unfortunately it has, and it really is just the game that we all have to play, right? Because I truly believe that some texts should just be left alone and just to be enjoyed, right? Not analyzed, not dissected, not picked apart. Yeah, some texts should just be enjoyed. So with that being said, I don't want to go on my rant for any longer. With that being said, the advice that I want to give you today is rooted in this concept of trustworthy techniques. Okay, so the naming of this concept is a bit tongue-in-cheek. I'm not going to lie, I named it Trustworthy Techniques because I wanted to have that alliteration, because for whatever reason, humans are more attracted to words or phrases that contain alliteration. It is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you'll see very soon why I have named it Trustworthy Techniques. Okay, so first of all, just a small disclaimer. This concept of trustworthy techniques is something that I've just made up myself. I haven't seen it being circulated around schools or on YouTube or on websites. I haven't really seen this concept before. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, so to speak. I'm just saying that as a disclaimer, right? It hasn't been verified by the English teachers of the world, right? So use this at your own risk. But even with that being said, I've used this myself for many years, and I've used this with my students, and they've often told me that it has been quite useful. Yeah, so which is why I'm passing this on now to all of you. So now let's actually take a look at what a trustworthy technique is. Yeah, so when I was designing this concept, I had three things in mind. So in order for a technique to be labeled or to be classified as a trustworthy technique, it needs to have all three of these qualities. The first quality, perhaps the most important one, is that for a technique to be trustworthy, then it has to be frequently found in the text type that we are examining. Yeah, so it must frequently occur in the text type that we are looking at. So for example, let's say imagery. When it comes to poetry, imagery is frequently found in poetry, right? Compared to, let's say, a paradox. Although both techniques are techniques, imagery is much more of a trustworthy technique because it's so frequently occurring in poetry when compared to a paradox. Yeah. The second quality is that the technique has to be very easily identifiable. And this is probably the most second important quality because think about it this way. Even if the technique that you're focusing on is frequently occurring in a text type, if you can't identify it, if you can't recognize it when you need it to, right, you're not going to be able to analyze it. You're not going to be able to use it in your response, right? And this point, this second quality is especially important when you're doing assessments that require you to answer unseen questions, right? That requires you to analyze unseen texts because you're under exam conditions and you have so many stresses going on. You really need techniques that will pop it out to you, right? So you won't be spending so much time. You won't be wasting time trying to find techniques that are not easily identifiable. Okay. The third quality, and this is the least important one, although all three qualities are important, this is the least important one, is that the technique needs to have an easy to explain effect. Okay. So think about imagery. The effect of imagery is very easy to explain compared to a paradox, right? A paradox, you would have to spend a lot of time thinking about how you can express yourself. You need to explain what the paradox is. And during under exam conditions, you might just not have time to do that. Right? So you need to stick to techniques that will allow you to explain their effects with ease. Okay, so to recap, a trustworthy technique needs to have all three of these qualities. Yeah, it has to be frequently found in texts, it has to be easily identifiable, and the technique needs to have an effect that's easy to explain. Okay? So by now, you might be thinking to yourself, why do I need to understand this concept of trustworthy techniques? Why do I need to allow it to take up space in my brain? Why do I need to differentiate between a technique that's trustworthy and a technique that's not trustworthy, right? And for me to answer that question, I urge you all to just have a think about every single technique that you know or every single technique that you have come across and then mentally assign a number to yourself. Okay? So most of us would have most likely come across 50 techniques, 100 techniques, maybe not 1,000, right? But definitely in the double digits, right? In terms of how many techniques that we know or how many techniques that we have come across. Yeah, but here's the kicker. You don't need to know all those techniques, right? You don't need to know or remember 50 techniques. You don't need to. I'm telling you that now, right? Because if you think about all the techniques that you do know or that you have come across, now think about how many of them do you write about? How many of them do you actually analyze on the regular, right? You really only analyze a select few, which means that you definitely don't have to remember every single technique in English literature, right? That's far from the truth. You don't need to do such a thing. Yeah? And this concept of a trustworthy technique is here to make you aware of that fact, right? To make you aware of the fact that you only really need to know a select few techniques for each text type for you to ace HSC or for you to ace high school English, I should say. Okay? So essentially, what this concept is trying to get you to do, this concept of trustworthy techniques, is to get you to focus on techniques that will give you the most bang for your buck, right? The techniques that will be there for you, that you can fall back on, techniques that will not waste your time, okay? Because the last thing that you want to do, right, is to misplace your attention on finding a technique that's not trustworthy, right? Focusing your attention on a technique that's not frequently found in texts, a technique that's not easily identifiable, a technique that has an effect that's not easy to explain. Because why would you want to focus on those things, right? On those techniques? You don't, right? You want to focus on trustworthy techniques because they will give you, right, the most value for the very limited amount of time that you may have, especially under exam conditions when you're analyzing a text. Or annotating a text for that matter. Okay. So, realistically speaking, each text type, so may that be film, short stories, poetry, visual texts, each text type will have a set of trustworthy techniques unique to each text type. Right? So there are some overlap between, let's say, poetry and short stories because they're all in the written form, and there are overlap with visual texts and film, right? But each text type will have its own set of unique trustworthy techniques. Yeah, and in this video, I won't go through the trustworthy techniques for each text type because the video is going to be like an hour long, right? So please let me know if you do want me to make a video on the text types for each. Let me know if you want me to make a video on the trustworthy techniques for each text type. Okay, so that's 4 T's. Wow, trustworthy techniques for each text type. T. Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So if you don't really want me to make that video, or if you don't watch that video, what I highly suggest you ought to do is to start compiling techniques which you think are trustworthy, and then just focus on looking for those techniques in the future when you're analyzing that certain text type. Okay, so just to recap, a trustworthy technique is a technique that's frequently found in texts, right? It's easily identifiable and it has an effect that's easy to explain. Okay, and this concept of a trustworthy technique is for you to understand that you don't have to remember, right, every single technique in English literature. You don't have to, right? You have to, but what you do have to do is to come up with a catalog of techniques which you can fall back on, right? Which you can always use when you are analyzing or annotating any text. Yeah, and that comes from experience, and it comes from a lot of reflection. Okay, but yeah, if you would like me to make a video on the trustworthy techniques for each text type, let me know. And if you're wondering how have I determined which technique is more trustworthy than another, well, I've done so by analyzing hundreds and thousands of poetry, or I've analyzed hundreds and thousands of films. Okay, and I've looked back at all of them and I've picked out the techniques that are reoccurring. Yeah, and that's how I've compiled a list of trustworthy techniques. Okay, so I will end the video here. Hopefully you all have gotten something out of this. Thank you for tuning in again. Please like and subscribe so that I can keep this channel going. Yeah, thank you very much.